Hello and welcome to Spring Office Hours, Season 3, Episode 12. Today is April 1st, 2024, and today is the last episode of Spring Office Hours. My name is Dan Vega, Spring Developer Advocate at Broadcom. Joined with me, as always, my good friend DaShaun. DaShaun, how you doing?
I am doing wonderful, and yeah, I've had a lot of fun lately, and today is April 1st. It's not our last episode. We were joshing you. We're glad to have you here. This is my favorite time of the week, and I look forward to it. And I know some of you do too. So yeah, let's hang out some more. We're not done.
We thought we'd have a little fun today. We didn't even know if we were going to have a scheduled show for today. And it came up, and today was April 1st, so I thought we'd have a little fun. Of course, we are going nowhere. This is our favorite show. This is our favorite time of the week. We are going to be here for as long as they let us be here. So don't worry, we're not going anywhere, at least not yet.
Right.
I mean, all things must come to an end, but it's not coming to an end today. So.
Hopefully a long time from now.
Yes.
We need like 200 more episodes.
Yeah. I looked, today was like number 79 or something. So it's pretty crazy to think about from where we started. I had a chance to go through some of the archives and just take a look at some of the very first episodes we did. And yes, we've gotten much better, but the kind of premise of the show has been the same. So
speaking of going through the archives, I have been taking our transcriptions and throwing them into a little LLM. My little Raspberry Pi was hot before we started the show, but I've taken those transcriptions and I'm feeding them into this little Llama 2 and Mistral examples, and I'm using Spring Boot to access those and do fun things using Spring AI. So I'm having a lot of fun with going through the latest episodes.
Well, Mistral was just added to Spring AI, and that is not something I'm familiar with. Can you tell me what Mistral is and why you're using that one?
I'm putting the Spring Cloud Gateway in front, and I'm asking kind of the same question across multiple LLMs, and I'm going to return to the user, to the interface, whichever one returns fastest. So I'm just exploring and seeing, because some models respond faster to certain types of questions. And I'm feeding in these as with the RAG example, that putting the transcripts into a vectorized database and then using that to influence the answer.
I was just going to comment on that. So I did a talk last week on Spring AI called Spring Into AI with our friends over at JetBrains and IntelliJ, and that presentation went really well. We had a ton of people in the live stream. A lot of people have been watching the replay, and that was one of the questions I got. Like, why Spring AI? Like, what are all these different models? So just as you said, Spring AI is really an abstraction over being able to talk to the different LLMs out there. And the question always comes up, like, where are all these different LLMs and why do you support them? And as you just said, different LLMs respond differently to different prompts that you're giving it. Maybe comes back with a better summarization or just responds better to those types of questions. So it's good to play around with them and try the different LLMs and see which one will better suit your use case. I know OpenAI is a big one, Google Gemini is a big one, but there are a bunch of other ones out there. We looked at huggingface.co has a list of all the LLMs out there. It's like 570,000 of them. So there's some big ones, but there are a lot of them out there. And as you said, there's some open source ones too, if you want to be able to just run it on your local laptop. So
And another example of what I've been doing locally is because I've got multiple models running. Another option is, hey, ask the same question to multiple models, but return all the results in a map. So that I can say, you know what, for that type of question, I would like this one. Because there's a lot of models to choose from. And you should do this exercise depending on what you're trying to do with these models and see which one fits best.
Yeah, and I think the nice thing about Spring AI is because it's this abstraction on top of it, your code doesn't change. You can just swap out a model and try something different with the same code, which is really cool.
Yeah.
So.
And it keeps on coming back. The more we get into these things, the more updates that we get from Spring AI, the more it feels comfortable. And this is just another example of how these abstractions and patterns that we have in the Spring ecosystem, how it allows, not just for what we have today, but the pattern has been set. This is how you put a beautiful abstraction layer over top of something new, like these AI models. And for us, we get the benefit of being able to move across these different models, evaluate which one's going to work for us, just like we do with our databases and Spring data.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And Mark Pollock usually kind of points this out during his presentations too. And I know you've mentioned it in the past. It really is a liken to Spring Data, right? Like you can talk to a database in Java, but there's another abstraction layer, which is the Spring JDBC template or JDBC client now. Then there's another abstraction, which is the Spring Data JDBC or Spring Data JPA. And it allows you to talk to a database, but still give you that consistent programming model over different databases. And Spring AI is just another example of this. And another thing we talked about in the presentation was like, okay, well, all these LLMs are making their services available over REST API. So why can't I just use Java? And you can just talk to an API over Java. But as you start digging into these projects a little bit more, you realize like a lot of the same things come up. Like, how do I parse the response into something that I can use, like a Java object, right? Or how do I work with these different RAGs and these embeddings and these vector databases? And Spring AI just kind of gives it to you.
Absolutely.
So
Thank you for
every
all the
time,
work. Makes it easy to consume. And it's
yeah,
just, I would expect nothing less. I honestly didn't, it took me a while to like really grasp on how much work has been done already by the Spring AI project and how valuable it is.
yep.
So yeah, thanks guys.
So today, well, let's get into this first. If you're here in the live stream, again, we live stream every Monday, 1 p.m. Eastern. Go ahead and get your questions in. Today is going to be a Q&A. We're going to try and answer some questions in the chat first. We have a special kind of discussion over on GitHub where you can ask your questions if you're not in the chat. And we'll try and answer some of those questions today as well. So that's our plan for today. If you're not in the live stream and you're joining us on a podcast, we turn this into a podcast. You can get us wherever you get your podcast from. If you want to find an archive of the show, head over to springofficehours.io. That's a great place to kind of check out all of our past archives there. So yes, today is April Fool's Day. We played a little joke, thought it would be a little fun, and I see some comments coming in already. Jitter Ted, happy April Fool's Day. George, our friend, says, I was panicked a bit, but then I remembered it was April Fool's Day today.
It worked.
It worked.
Hopefully,
I had a couple,
you're smiling.
I had a couple people DM me on Twitter saying, is this really the last episode? I'm like, no, this is not the last episode. Please come and join us. So we have our usual friends here. Simon, how's it going, our friend? What happened in the season finale?
What happened?
Did we find out what previous
it was all just a
episodes
dream.
were? It was all just a dream. That'd be nice. Like maybe we'll have a cliffhanger for this year's season finale.
We've been using Java 8 the whole time.
Good friend Thomas is here. Hello. I had another one. Can we talk about writing testable code? Yes, let's come right back to that one. Friend James, hello everyone. Last episode. Hello from Atlanta. My friend Donald, who I got to meet in Atlanta, is here today. So hello, Donald. Donald, I took one of your questions that you emailed me and put it into our discussion. So we're going to talk about that today as well. Our friend Todd is here. Good day, gentlemen.
Absolutely. And, my parents like to watch this. Hi, Mom and Dad. If you're joining us from somewhere, like when you say hi, like tell us where you're from, because that's the cool thing for Mom and Dad when they get to see like, oh, yeah, today somebody was from here. And we get to talk about it at dinner. So, yeah.
Yeah, I wonder if did we fool your mom and dad? Let's see if we fooled them.
Actually, I should. I will check. They might text me. We'll see if they.
All right. Haha, me too. My soul has returned to my body. So this is just a testament to what a great community we have, DaShaun, and we don't want to take this resource away from everyone. So I will mention, I mentioned this in my newsletter this morning, that about Spring Office Hours, we have been getting some really great audiences lately with a lot of really great questions, a lot of like positive feedback from our community. So again, I just want to continue to say thank you for you guys for showing up, for listening to the podcast, for leaving those reviews on the podcast, because that really helps us out. You guys are an awesome community and we appreciate it.
Yeah, the podcast has been picking up. Like it.
Yeah.
I think I told you last week, where I get the message, like somebody just saying, thank you for improving my commute to work. Thank you for that. At least one day a week, we're helping out somebody's commute, and that's enough. Like that works. It's valuable. And yeah, thanks for checking out the podcast. It's great.
Awesome. We have somebody from Ethiopia.
Wonderful.
We have somebody from India. It is April, which means I'm going to India this month, which I'm very much excited about. I'm also a little terrified because it's a 24-hour flight for me. So the longest plane ride I've ever been on is like 10 and a half hours back from Barcelona. So this is going to be interesting. I don't sleep well on planes. I don't know how I'm going to make it, but I will get there somehow and figure everything out. But I'm excited about that.
I'm excited for you.
Never been to India. Big fan of India. Big fan of our community there. I'm also a very big Indian food fan, so I'm excited to try some local cuisine there.
That'll be fun.
That's going to be a lot of fun. Oh, another one. Hello from India, BK. Wonderful. Hopefully, I'll be seeing some of you at GIDS, the Great International Developer Summit. So that's going to be fun. Hello from Nigeria. Hello from France. Oh, this is great. All right. So today is Q&A. We have some questions coming in here. We'll get to these questions. We'll try and get to some of the discussions over there. So I've started a couple, DaShaun. I am just going to bring them up. First one is, can we talk about writing testable code? So let's think about this one. First off, I'm going to point you to my YouTube channel just because I have some resources there off the top of my head. One is really understanding all of the tools that are available to you in Spring Framework, in Spring Boot for writing tests. Now, the nice thing is when you go to start.spring.io and fill out your project dependencies, you don't have to say, I want to write tests. We automatically do that for you. You don't have to opt in. It's already a dependency there. It comes with a lot of other dependencies, a lot of the common things that you'll need to write tests. So you don't have to worry about that. And it's in a test scope. So when you go ahead and build your artifact, it's not including all of those things. So that's the first thing, really understanding what tools, because I know that when I was writing, like early on writing Spring, heck, even a few years ago, man, writing tests, I would see like examples online and I would go, I don't know, like, what are you doing here? Like, what are the tools involved? Like, how did you get to this point? And I think really just understanding what's baked in gets you a long way. Being able to read tests first is going to help you write tests, right? The same way we talk about code. If you can read code first, you kind of get a sense, and then it's much easier to write code if you can read it first. So I think that's kind of the first step for me. How about you, DaShaun?
Well, this has been kind of the number one thing that I've been thinking about the past week. We've talked about Spring Modulith here, and a lot of times it's easy. Like when you're starting a new project, it's easy to jump in or it's easier to build tests, to do the TDD approach. But sometimes it's hard to come in late to a project. And one of the things that's on my mind lately is the idea that the layered approach of, hey, here's my models, here's my repositories, here's my controllers, etc. That model can get kind of turned. Simon here says, use the slices, right? We have this repository. We can do the Spring Data JPA slices. We can do the controller slices. We have this approach. But one of the things that we get with Spring Modulith is we can kind of turn that on the side and we can do a slice on just a feature or just a module. So one of the things I'm leaning into lately is the guardrails that Spring Modulith provides around, ArchUnit, right? Making sure that your objects aren't reaching outside of the package and aren't reaching outside of their scope. There's some default rules that are given to us with Spring Modulith, and I'm starting to kind of lean into it for everything, right? It doesn't have to be a monolith in order for me to use Spring Modulith. I am starting to lean into Spring Modulith for its testability. If I'm following and using those guardrails, it's going to make it easier from the beginning. And also, like if somebody jumps into my project later, maybe I didn't do TDD, and I'm looking to go back and add some tests. The things that Spring Modulith provides around testing is going to make my life easier at the beginning, greenfield or brownfield. So that's what's on my mind right now. Slices for the win, and Spring Modulith gives me a whole bunch more bang for the buck if I add it to my repository.
Yeah, and I know Ted talks about this a lot with like hexagonal architecture. Like your architecture does make a difference when it comes to testing. So those are things to think about. I think of writing testable code, being able to not just write all your code and then come back and write some tests. For me, being able to look at your code and go, is, being able to write a test for a certain block of code. And if you start struggling to write a test for it, that's really an indication that maybe I should refactor something here. So a classic example of this is in a controller. If I do a whole bunch of things, like I take in a request, then I validate some data, then I send it over to or do some kind of business logic, then do some kind of data logic in my controller there, right there, that's a red flag saying you're doing too much stuff here. You can't write a test for this because there's too many things going on. And then, as we know, we kind of separate some of those concerns, right? We move the business logic to a service layer. We move the data logic to a data layer. So I think just, even if it's not pure TDD, right? Like red, green, then kind of write your code. Just taking a unit of your code and saying, can I write a test for this? As you write the test for it, you go, this doesn't feel right. For me, right there, that's writing more testable code. Being able to take a look at your code. Can I write some tests for this? So it's easier if you do it right up front, whether it's write the code first or write the test first, but don't go write an entire feature and then come back and try to write tests for it. If you're writing tests as you're coding, I think it just kind of gives you a heads up as to, I'm writing testable code here. So I think it's as simple as that. It's not easy, but it is as simple as that.
And if we're just taking the time to think about it, as we're doing our development, it's going to make a big difference. Again, I'm leaning into this Spring Modulith approach. If I'm putting things into features, into modules, and right, that idea of having a layer test. Like I want to test my login feature, my authentication feature. Having the model in a model class and having things spread out across packages makes it really difficult to see my tests and to think about those tests, because again, everything has to be public. By just following the conventions that are laid out, we're going to make better code. And I'm also going to lean into this, that having those guardrails and having that be a practice that you adopt and that you use, it's not that hard. It's not that hard to switch from doing things by layer to doing things by module or feature. And Spring Modulith makes it easy. So if you look in my GitHub, you'll see there's a lot of package by layer. But the transition to package by feature, to package by module has been easy, and the benefits have been, amazing. So
so JitterTed says Spring code is still Java code, so separation of concerns and refactoring to separate out I/O can make it easier to write tests. And I think I want to pull a little piece of that out there. Refactoring. When you said writing more testable code, don't be afraid to come back and go, this code is not that testable. I need to refactor it. That is completely fine. We as developers do that all the time. We write code to get it to work, and then we take a look at it and go, you know what? This could probably be done a better way. So refactor it, write your tests. If your tests still are complex, refactor some more. So I think that's a really good tip there.
Dan, what's the minimum amount of tests? Like if I throw out a project, in this example is a Spring Batch project, and I say, hey, will you take a look at this? You take a look. What's the minimum amount? Like what gives you a sense of, okay, there's been some work done and these tests prove that it does work the way it's expected? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, so it depends on organizations. Some organizations are still stuck in the past, and it says like, hey, you need to have 80% code coverage or 90% or 100% code coverage. And if you don't know what code coverage is, there's a way like in IDE or test frameworks to say, how much tests have I written to cover the amount of code that I've written? So trying to write 100% code coverage is just a waste of time, if you ask me. But some companies will throw out that number. So if you're in an organization, unfortunately, sometimes you have to follow those guidelines. For me, it's, hey, have we covered all of the test cases that we know about? Sometimes things are going to come up, and maybe a unique scenario comes up, and you don't find out about it till later. Fine, we can add that test in later. But do we have the confidence that if we put this into production, that everything is going to work? So there isn't a number for that answer. There is sometimes a feel like if I'm looking at the test coverage, like, is this a particular feel for that? But I'm just trying to say, like, do we have the confidence that we can put this into production and the next person that comes along is not going to break anything, right? So the next person that comes along adds a feature. Do they cover enough of the test cases for that feature to be able to go into production and not break anything? So that's kind of my answer. What's your answer there?
Yeah, I want a test. I want a test so that if I'm looking at your code, I want something that exercises. And I think if I've only got one test, I want it to be an end-to-end test. I want it to be something that, hey, yeah, given some input, I get some output. That's kind of my top level. But if I start to develop, I want to have some conviction, some visibility as to here's where my tests go, and that there's actually tests there before me.
Yeah.
So
that's a good point. Another thing we can kind of touch on is like, hey, don't test a lot of the framework stuff. Like, we know the framework repositories for Spring Data are already written in tests in the framework. Don't test that stuff unless you have like custom finders and you just want to like test that out. Okay, but for the like core logic in the framework, don't test that. I like you. We've talked about this a lot. I have moved more towards kind of the integration test side. Like, that pyramid used to be way more unit tests and way less integration tests. And I think it was because a lot of the tools that we had available to us at the time. That's kind of flipped, right? With things like test container support. We can spin up a Docker container of whatever we're trying to test against, and we can have that fast feedback loop for an integration test. So yeah, I tend to write more integration tests, but use all the tests that are available to you.
Another follow-up from Jitter Ted, he brings up mutation testing. Yeah, this is kind of the nice approach, and I used to work on a framework a long time ago that would basically, hey, here's my REST endpoints, and it takes string inputs, and I would generate a bunch of different types of strings to find out, like, hey, is it going to work for all these cases? It didn't have any context about what was actually happening, but based on the interface, it was modifying the inputs and outputs and helping find the gaps in my testing. But this is kind of it's still like a new area. There's still a lot of stuff going on, and there's no real like winner for adding mutation testing into our Spring frameworks. So I'd love to hear more about that, but that is definitely an option. I know there are commercial products out there that do that, but yeah, that is definitely something where I feel like there's a lot of bang for the buck without a lot of investment. So.
Yep. Yeah, another comment here from our friend Simon, and something like ArchUnit to guide new developers and safeguard your legacy can also help. So
this is, yes, again, the more I dig into Spring Modulith, the more I think about how many times do we get asked about what are the best practices, right? Just having a framework, having this project, this Spring Modulith project that includes ArchUnit and the J molecules, that includes these things out of the box is so powerful. And the more I get into it, the more I'm thinking about all the other teams that I've been on, how nice it would have been to have something like ArchUnit in place. Like when I go and I build my first project, have that in place already, to have that practice in place. Think of how much pain and suffering I would have saved myself and the rest of my team and all the people that have followed behind us if those were in place. How do you do that?
Absolutely.
How do you do that at scale? Like, how do you get those practices, better or worse? Like, how do you get those practices adopted at scale? Spring Modulith gives us a way, again, another abstraction to help us do these things. Again, I'm excited about it. It's a great project.
Cool. All right. So that was our first question. Let's get into a couple more here. So I have that. So how about this one? So all examples I see about virtual threads are related to API requests. Does virtual threads help in any way in multi-threading? So really, all right, so what we're talking about here, at least in the context of building Spring apps, right? Anytime we build Spring MVC apps, anytime we're doing anything that is a blocking request, we are talking to a database, we are talking to another service via HTTP. These types of things are blocking. So in a normal sense, in our current applications, when a request comes in, it is going to use a thread, which is basically a wrapper around an operating system thread. And it's going to block that operating system thread till that request has been fulfilled. And so this, when we take a lot of throughput, when we get high volume traffic, this is going to eventually cause issues. And we have to find other ways to scale the application, right? So coming back to the question, all I see it about is related to API requests. That's because HTTP is a blocking mechanism. It also helps with databases, right? It also helps with, I don't know, like if you're using JMS is technically like a blocking API, right? So anything that's blocking, that's what it's going to help with. So does it help anyway in multi-threading? So there are two other JEPs in Project Loom, one of which is structured concurrency. So if a request comes in and I need to like talk to one service, talk to another service, and then kind of aggregate those responses, that is something else that is coming down the pipe that is going to help with that. So if you do a lot of that, that'd be something Spring Webflux does really well right now. So you can always reach for that. But yeah, I would say in general, if you're building blocking applications using Spring MVC, that's where virtual threads is really going to help you with scalability. If you're doing just kind of computational CPU intensive operations, then you can turn virtual threads on, but you're probably not going to see any performance improvements there.
It'll help with organizing, right? The typical, if I'm doing multi-threading, I'm always worried about like, hey, how many cores I have? And I'm thinking about, hey, I only want this many things happening at once. With the virtual threads, that doesn't become as big of a factor, right? I can let the JVM handle those threads for whatever I'm doing.
Yeah. Oh, input, output, that's another thing. So if you're reading a whole bunch of information from some IO stream, that's another example. That has nothing to do with a HTTP API request. So yeah, there are a bunch of things that it's going to help with as long as those things are like blocking operations, or as DaShaun said there. So
yeah, I'd like to hear more about what the example is, what you're trying to do. And yeah, we can investigate together. That's part of the fun here.
Yep. Okay. Another question comes from Thomas. Hey, Dan and DaShaun, nice to see you. I have a question. Are you guys still working on Spring Security Access Control List, ACL, to have more granular way to control security authorizations in Spring? I don't know a whole lot about this, so I'll have to concede to the security experts. If we have any in the audience, that'd be great. If not, I will take this offline and see if we can take a look into this.
Yeah, we kind of need a little bit more context. If you can help fill us in with your use case, maybe we can help you out with a better answer.
Yeah, that'd be great. And like always, check out the documentation, check out the release notes on Spring Security, and just kind of look through the issues and see if maybe you're having a specific issue that is not working. And if it is, maybe somebody's already filed an issue for that. If there is, then there's usually like a thread going on of like, this is what I tried to do with the NACL, and this is what wouldn't work. And if that's not the case, if there is no issues there and you think you are having an issue, that's a great way to start this discussion. Create an issue over under Spring Security. This is what I'm trying to do. This is my expected result or my expected outcome. And that's not what I'm getting. And, this is where all of the Spring team is looking for those types of feedback. Like if you're having an issue with that, they will respond to those questions on there. So I'd say that's probably a better place to start than me, because I'm not an expert on that. All right. Our good friend Todd, I'm in Phoenix and seeing you both in DevNexus. You
Absolutely.
will see DaShaun. You will see DaShaun there.
You're not coming.
Unfortunately, you won't see me. No. I am leaving on Friday for vacation. It is my wife's big birthday. Big birthday for my wife. So we're going to Florida for the week to relax and catch a little R&R.
All right. Well deserved.
Yes, I'm excited for that. So I am not going to be working at all next week. But you will see DaShaun. So you guys should
be working hard.
How you have a good talk coming up on Spring Modulith. Yep. I kind of did a little press for you on my talk last week. How's that coming along?
Like I said, for the past week, I don't know this stuff. And in order for me to be comfortable in front of you, I've got to do it 100 times. I've got to walk through my demo. I got to walk through my presentation at least 100 times before I feel comfortable. And I've been having a lot of fun because I started preparing for this on an older version of Spring Modulith, and there's been so many improvements. And now what I've kind of pulled away, again, I'm happy that I'm deep. And what I'm pulling away is there's some really, really valuable stuff here that goes way beyond the Modulith pattern. And yeah, and I'm just excited. So yeah, I'm going to be talking about it this week. It will be my first like small audience run, and then I'll be delivering.
Where are you doing that?
That is with a customer
Nice.
this week, and yeah, it's fun. We get to do this kind of stuff where yeah, some of our customers have these engagements with us. They have a Spring One tour where somebody like Simon says, hey, I would love for you guys to come and give us a mini conference that's dedicated just for us. And that's what we do. So we're not here doing Spring Office Hours, and we're not on stage at conferences. We're working with customers just like you in a more intimate engagement. And we're having conference type sessions that are specific to what you're looking for. And that's been fun.
I'm hoping that's the one I'm giving this week too at the same customer. So if it is, I'm going to watch your presentation. All right.
It is.
Then I will definitely check that out. So I'm excited about that. All right. Let's go. We got one more here. I've got an interview question asking about the latest stuff in the Spring ecosystem. What is the best way to answer this question? First off, you got to tell them that you watch the Spring Office Hours podcast.
Yep.
If you tell them
that's answer number one.
They know that you're up to date, because that's what we do here every single week. So I would say that's number one. Number two is just talk about whatever is in the latest stuff that you've been able to play with. So the latest version, the latest stable release is 3.2. So some of the things that went into 3.2 were the new client abstractions. So the REST client and the JDBC client. If you were able to talk about those and how useful those are compared to the JDBC template and the REST template, that'd be a good start. Hey, virtual threads and being able to run AOT and Project Crack. Those are the latest developments in kind of runtime efficiency. So, hey, come here, stay up to date on some of the latest things, look through the release notes, look at calendar.spring.io to see what some of the latest releases are. I think those are a pretty good start.
And if you're getting asked that question, I want you to do yourself a favor and ask them, what version of Java are you taking to production today? Because that's going to make a difference. If they're using Java 8, it doesn't matter what the latest, greatest versions of Spring are doing, right? If they're still taking Java 8 to production, they can't use the latest and greatest stuff. Then, based on that answer, ask them what version they're taking to production. Whether they want to know what you're doing, you also want to know what they're doing. If they're not taking Spring Boot 3. something to production, run away.
No, and one up them. If they're still on Java 8 and 2.7, be like, well, some of the things that I've been learning about are how to upgrade Spring applications from my friends Dan and DaShaun, using tools like Open Rewrite, the Spring Boot Migrator, all the tools that we have available to us. So kind of flip that back on them and be able to answer that question. Go, I'm valuable to you because I could help you upgrade your current applications.
Yeah. Simon threw in another one of my favorite new features, basics for encoded properties. And I think it's actually Simon that really put it on my radar, where this isn't something that I've messed around with, but I can see the absolute value here. So yeah, that's another good one. Good job.
All right. Just looking here. Donald has one. DaShaun, will your Spring Modulith Dev Nexus talk be available after the presentation?
Donald, because you're a friend of the show, I would love to just bring you in and we can do a Zoom, and I'll give you a personal one-on-one as long as you give me feedback afterwards. I'll give you the preview and I'll deliver it for you afterwards. Like, we can do that. We have that.
To answer your question, though, DevNext is pretty good at getting all these up on YouTube after the fact. Maybe not the day of, but after the fact, these are usually on YouTube.
There you go.
I have a comment. Oh, no. Sorry. I thought I was grabbing one from here. Our friend Anand got laid off today. Anand, I'm very sorry to hear that. I can't go a day or a week without seeing tech layoffs, and it is something that it hurts, because I understand like the kind of stress that it puts on you, like what happened, what do I do, what's next, these questions, just the questions that you start asking yourself. I will just say, take your moment today to kind of take it in, figure out your next step. But then, good things can come from this. I've talked to a lot of people that have gotten laid off, and their next job, their next position was a step up or more money or something they're more interested in doing, and maybe both. So I know this is not fun. This is not a fun time, a lot of stress, but try and take that in and get ready for the next step, because it can be pretty exciting. And let us know if there's anything we can do to help out there. Also, the new observation improvements, integrating micrometer, et cetera. So anything from Spring Boot 3 on, Spring Framework 6 on, there have been a whole bunch of observability improvements. So those could be things that you could definitely talk about in your interview. Simon says, hey, tell them about the Spring Health Assessment Report and Open Rewrite. I agree, Simon. Flip this back on them and say, if you're on Java 8, I'm the one that can help you get your applications upgraded, because I know about all these things the Spring Office Hours community is telling me about.
Awesome.
I got excited about the Spring AI module. Again, we talked about it at the beginning. I did too. Somebody also jumped in here and said, is this the last show? If you're just joining us now, it is not the last show. Today's April 1st, April Fool's Day. We thought we'd have a little fun. We are going nowhere. We enjoy doing this every week. So, all right, let me do this. I have some questions. Let me go ahead and share my screen. And I am going to take, I think it was Ted who had the comment last week and said, can you please put the Q&A discussion board in the comments of the show notes? So from now on, I'm going to get this in there as like a footer saying, hey, if you need to ask your questions, this is a place to do it. I've been taking questions. I tweeted this out earlier, DaShaun. Every time I think I'm caught up on stuff, I look at emails, Twitter DMs, YouTube comments, GitHub notifications, and then full anxiety attack of like, oh my God, I have all this stuff to catch up on. So I will say I am trying to catch up on questions everywhere. Please don't be offended if I have not got to your question. It's just a lot to keep up on. So what I've been doing is taking some of those questions that I think are worthy of a discussion, not necessarily because they're better questions, but they are targeted more towards an open discussion than, hey, I'm doing this, this, and this, and this is my output. That's not really a good discussion. This kind of is. So I'm going to go down the line here. And I had this one. Hey, Dan and DaShaun, I was wondering if there are incubating projects in the Spring ecosystem that anyone is working on that will allow for connectivity to blockchain technologies. Thanks again for the great podcast. We'll talk to you all soon. So unfortunately, I am not big in the blockchain space. I don't know a whole bunch about it. I don't know of any that are incubating. The easiest way to look is under GitHub, we have kind of the Spring projects umbrella. That is all the official projects. If you look under, there is a Spring experimental projects. So these are where somebody will take like some type of an idea and turn this into a project. It goes through a pretty rigorous phase of like from idea to experimental and then from experimental to projects. That would be a good place to start. See if there's anything in there. But honestly, I don't think there is, or there's nothing that I'm aware of. Are you looking there now, DaShaun?
Yeah, there was a couple of projects that I remember from, I guess, early in the blockchain hype cycle, and I don't remember the names. So I know because I was using Spring at that time. I know there are implementations, but I don't know how wide use they are, and I don't think there are any in the upstream Spring core, Spring framework, Spring Boot. I don't think there are any in our organization, but I know there are implementations out there.
Cool. So I will mark that. I had a question. Somebody asked me this. Hi, Dan. Hope you're doing well. I follow you here since you post interesting content about Java. Well, thank you very much. I see you've been named a Java champion, and that is one of my goals. Is there a roadmap you use? Training? Any advice is greatly welcome. So, yeah, there are a couple things here. One, don't put a timetable on this. Don't say like in 3 years I need to be a Java champion, or it's going to take 20, because it doesn't. It varies for everyone. I've been doing this for 23 years and just named a Java champion this year. I haven't worked in Java for 23 years, but most of that has been on the JVM, coincidentally. But I will say, like, being a Java champion is all about, being a champion of Java, being out in the community in some aspects. So first off, getting involved in the community, just being here on Spring Office Hours. If you're here with us every week, if you're staying up to date with what's going on in Java and Spring, that's a really good start. Different Java champions take different paths. So you'll see in there, some of them are really distinguished authors. Like our friend Ken Cousin, who has written like 6-7 books, Mark Heckler, Craig Walls, right? Like these folks have written lots and lots of books. There are some who are just exceptional speakers and go on the speaker tour and every conference they're at speaking about something. There are some who are YouTubers or bloggers or open source contributors. So there isn't a definition of what you need to do. It's really about being a champion of Java and being out in the community, contributing to open source, speaking, blogging, however that looks for you, whatever you're interested in, I would say take that path. So really becoming pretty good at Java. I will never say an expert because I am no expert on Java. And I know there are some others on there that aren't like, hey, there are plenty of Java engineers out in the world who are way better at writing Java than I am. So it's not just about that, but that's a very good kind of first step. So yeah, I think that's all I have to say about that. But being involved in the community, being passionate for Java, for the things that you're working in, and just sharing your passions with others.
Yep. We got a lot of good comments here. There's different paths. Speaking, advocating, being involved in jugs, authoring books and blogs, etc. Sharing, caring, the form matters a bit less.
Yep.
Enjoy the journey.
What a great comment. I have to echo that. Do not get caught up on the fact that your entire career needs to be validated to be a Java champion. Like, if these are the things that you enjoy doing, if you enjoy speaking, if you enjoy like creating videos so that others can learn this stuff, that is enough. Like, enjoy the journey. The rest will take care of itself. Awesome. Okay, so I have another one here. I'm not going to be able to answer this. Again, this is another security one that I don't have an answer to. And I think this might, no, I don't know if this is from our friend Donald, but I followed your tutorials on YouTube. The Spring security videos are awesome. Can you shed some light on how we can enable both X509 and JWT in the security filter train? So I knew I didn't have an answer for this, but I wanted to get this out there to see if somebody else had an answer for it. I know being able to use JWT in Spring Security 6 is fairly trivial. So out of the box, you can do that. And I have some videos on that. I don't even know. I don't think I have an example of X509 anywhere. So whoever asked this question, if you are watching the podcast or listening to the podcast or watching the live stream, I would say just what I echoed before on the Spring security side. First, we need a little bit more context. Like, can you not do both of those things at one time? That seems like something you should be able to do. So a little bit more context on what you're doing. And two, if you are trying to do this thing, and I'm trying to implement both, and it's not working, and you expect it to be working, go ahead and check the Spring security issues, see if there's anyone else having this issue. And if that's not the case, go ahead and file an issue and say, I expect to be able to use both of these. I'm not able to. Here's what I'm doing. Here's my expected outcome. Here's the outcome that I'm getting. I think that's a really much better place to start than me because I'm not an expert on that stuff. So cool. Let's see if we can get some that we can actually answer. Oh, this is a good one. So I saw this morning and I pinged Spencer, and Spencer was able to help out. So this question says, I am trying to migrate a Spring Cloud Gateway WebFlux application to the new Spring Cloud Gateway MVC. I managed to rewrite the filters, but I cannot integrate with Eureka Discovery Client to build the routes from the registry. On the WebFlux version, you can set the property gateway.discovery.locator.enable to equal to true. Also, the current version of Spring Cloud Documentation 4.1 GA is not working. He also mentioned there's a Stack Overflow question about this. So I went straight to the source. I asked Spencer about this morning, and he already replied on this discussion saying the doc links will be fixed shortly. The feature of creating routes has not been implemented yet. Watch the Spring Cloud Gateway issue, and he gave a link to that. So this is an important note. So first off, thanks to Spencer for answering this. Two, Spring Cloud Gateway MVC is not a direct port of Webflux. It was written from the ground up, trying to implement all the features that Spring Cloud Gateway Webflux had, but everything is not a one-to-one mapping. So this is a good example of that.
Yeah, and I would add on here. Don't. If you've already got a Spring Cloud Gateway Webflux implementation, why switch? Right? If you've got a working example, like there's not a reason that I can think of that off the top of my head of why you'd want to switch.
Unless you're just,
right? If you've already got Spring Web in place and you're looking for, maybe you're using Zool still, and that might be an easier path to upgrade to the latest and greatest. But if I've got something that's currently working using the Spring Cloud Gateway reactive, I'm trying to think of a good reason why I would want to switch. Why I'd want to put in that work.
Most of the cases were what you said, like if you're starting a new project and your team is used to writing imperative applications and you're going to write a bunch of like code and configuration and routes in Java code, then yeah, that's a great example to use it. Another one we heard a lot of is like they couldn't use Spring Cloud Gateway unless it was in MVC because for whatever reason, there's some kind of organizational constraint on writing reactive applications. So
you know what? Now they say that. Yeah, I think I've heard that example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that comes up, but they already have a Webflux one in place, so that wouldn't pertain to them. So,
so yeah, but good question. But that again, right? We get the same kind of question about Webflux in general. Like, hey, now that we've got these options, can we get rid of Webflux and we have virtual threads? Can we get rid of Webflux and reactive style programming? Why? Like you're not going to switch away from a reactive style of programming from Webflux. You're not going to switch into something that is significantly faster. What are the other benefits that you would get unless your reactive programmers have left the building? I'm trying to think of a reason why anybody would want to switch if you've got something in place. And we hear that all the time, but that's my same answer is there's no need to switch. Don't switch away from reactive anything if it's already working for you and you've already got an investment in it. Just keep it updated.
Mm-hmm.
There's no need to switch away from it. It's going to be around.
Cool. All right, I have another question here that I'm not going to be able to answer, but that's okay. We're here. We're getting our community involved. This one's about Spring State Machine, which I don't have a ton of experience with. It says, why Spring State Machine has moved to a reactive style and any change to implement it to a blocking application with example and why it's not listed at start.spring.io.
I can start to answer that. There was a little bit of time where the Spring State Machine was no longer going to be supported. It was kind of like we weren't getting a lot of input. This is why things like the State of Spring survey that hopefully you all filled out, this is why these things are important. And what happened was it kind of got reinvigorated. It came back and we started to push out a new release. Why it's not on start.spring.io, there are a lot of Spring projects that are not on start.spring.io. That doesn't mean they're not supported in good projects. It just means that there might be a better, easier way to implement something, or there might not be an example, a useful example that is a common pattern to make it worth putting it on start.spring.io. The purpose of start.spring.io is to kind of get you started on a project. And you'll notice that there are tons of examples of ways that you can start a project, but it's not adding a lot of code. It's not adding a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
These projects are still valid. It is still supported. Just because it's not on start.spring.io does not mean that it's getting less favor. It's still supported. You're still getting new releases. So yeah, don't be afraid of that. It's just with what we're trying to do with start.spring.io, we're trying to hit the the most popular use cases first and give an easy onboarding experience, an easy pattern. And we only give kind of one example for how to get something out the door.
All right. I'm going to skip the SSL bundle one because I need to look into that a little bit more. I think this was one of the questions from our friend Donald. You asked me to email you about handling entity at embeddable entries in package by feature architecture. The challenge would appear to be to reuse them since package by feature uses package private by default. So I wonder, in any of your exploration into like Spring Modulith, has this been able to solve some of that? I'm sure you can use Spring Data JPA embeddable entities within a module, but then it's talking cross modules. So I don't know the answer to this off the top of my head either. This is something I'll have to dive into.
Yeah, I think that the answer from the Spring Modulith approach is you can have modules of modules. You can have submodules in that concept. If you're trying to do this package by feature, really, it's okay. And this is the thing I always default to. It's okay.
Yeah.
A user in the inventory sense of the word might be completely different than a user in the security sense of the word. And I think I had this conversation with Thomas last week. It is okay to have more than one user or more than one account in your system, just because it's an account and there might be some loose representation where they're related. It's okay to have more than one. But also, if you're thinking about things as in this feature / module slice, think of the concept of having a submodule that has the parent module that will allow you to do something like an embeddable superset or subset of an entity.
Great answer. Thank you. One other one that I had that I thought I'd go ahead and talk to. I did a video on the Docker Compose lifecycle or Docker Compose feature in Spring Boot 3.1. We've talked a lot about this. One of the questions that came up was, hey, when the server is restarted, the container will automatically restart as well. It'd be wonderful if you can give me more of an example of this. So the defaults for this is if I have a Docker Compose file, when I start a Spring application, it's going to look at that and start all of my services. When I stop the Spring application, it's going to stop those services. That is the default. There is a property called spring.dockercompose.lifecycle management. The default is start and stop. You could change it to start. You could say, hey, when my Spring applications, just start it. But when I stop it, don't stop that service because I'm going to use it again later. Or you could say none. Like, don't do that. I'm going to manage that some other way. So there is a little bit of lifecycle management around the Docker Compose stuff. So I hope that answers your question. We got a question here in chat. Why native support not mature enough, even in Spring Boot 3.3 RC1? I would like to work with native images, but seen a lot of issues, especially in JPA or JDBC related.
I have questions because I'm using Spring Boot 3.2.4, the latest and greatest. If you're running into something in the RC, open an issue. I think we've, even on the show, we've done examples of all sorts of patterns using them. I delivered a native images running on Raspberry Pis, and we've done examples with Spring Cloud Tasks, Spring Batch, Spring Shell, Spring Web, Spring Web Flux, using JPA, using JDBC, using all the things. And there's not a hole or a gap in anything that's in the Spring umbrella. You might be running into something that is specific, but if there's something that works in Spring Boot 3.2 that's not working in Spring Boot 3.3, definitely raise your hand. If there's something that if this is your first project getting to native images, hopefully you understand all about the metadata reachability, and you understand about the proxies and reflection that you're using in your project, making sure that you're exposing that. If your project doesn't have the proper hints needed for GraalVM, make sure you understand how to provide those, and doing things like running the agent that will help you show you what's being exposed in your tests. That'll give you an easy path to give GraalVM the hints that you need. I think that the native image stuff is very mature, And I don't expect that there's gaps in the 3.3 but RC1, but if there are, please open an issue. And if you would like some help, this is again something I'm excited about. You want help? You know how to get a hold? Call me. Like let's jump in and let's figure out what's going on. Maybe I can help you with some a little bit of elbow grease and some side-by-side programming.
Yeah, and we have plenty of examples of building, pretty large applications into native images. We have a lot of customers using this feature. So it has to be something specific there. And one thing I've always done with kind of large applications, like, all right, maybe I can just take the Spring Data JPA piece out of it. Maybe something else is going on there. Also enable a little bit more logging, a little bit more debugging, and see if you can kind of pinpoint as to what's causing that issue. But this is absolutely ready for prime time. It was in 3.0, it is in 3.2, and it will be in 3.3. So there's something else kind of going on there.
Love to hear more. Love to hear your feedback.
All right, I got one more question here on the discussion board. Again, if you have questions, github.com/spring-office-hours. There's a Spring Office Hours podcast. We have enabled the discussion boards for things like Q&A, polls, ideas for shows you'd like us to do. Go ahead and head over there and fill that out. Greetings, sir. My name is blank. I'm in the final year as a student at blank. I'm always inspired by your work, especially your contributions to the Java community. In the past few days, I've been learning how to contribute to open source by developing different tools and libraries to help Java developers. That's really cool. I finished my first ever Maven dependency, but I'm struggling on publishing this to Maven Central. How can we do that? So, I will say I don't have any. Somebody's already actually added a comment here, which is really great to see. I'm going to find the article I was looking at earlier. Our friend of the show has a really good article on this. Sorry, let me just find this. This is kind of my go-to because somebody has asked me about this before. Sorry. Where did that go? Oh no, I will find it and get in there. Let me see. Let me just Maven. Oh, I know what it is. Publishing to Maven Central. So there's a bunch of articles actually. If you go down and look at this, there's like some from friends at JetBrains. Grado has some good ones. Fujay has a good one. But I wanted to find this specific one.
Simon adds the comment that JReleaser is great for publishing to Maven Central.
Oh, that's a very good one.
A lot of people are using JReleaser.
Oh, I feel like a failure. I cannot find the article I was looking for. I will get it in this comment. But there are a bunch of good articles on this. And yeah, as Simon said, JReleaser is a really good project to be able to get this out there. So thanks, Simon, for sharing that. Also, there is somebody added a comment in here. Here are some pages on that, how to deploy to remote. Yeah, so there's some good information on that. So this is like two battles, right? Like, hey, I'm developing this cool thing. I've got this cool thing working on my machine. Now I need to get it out there for others to be able to use it. Maven Central is where you want it to be. Whenever we start up a new project, we have that as a repository that's listed. So once it's there, we can just list it as a dependency in our POM, and boom, we get to pull your project down. So yeah, definitely. Thanks for the question there. So please keep your questions coming. I know we didn't get to all of those today, but we will get to those a little bit on every show. And then I just want to check, see if we have any other questions here.
There's one more in the chat from Rajiv. It says, what are pros of Spring Cloud Gateway over Nginx apart from security aspects? Latest one. Will Spring Cloud Gateway outperform Nginx in terms of performance? A lot of times, yes. It depends on your use case. But I can say from my experience and from customer experience that there are many situations where Spring Cloud Gateway will outperform Nginx. So do you need both? Oftentimes, no. It depends on. I'm going to ask you this. What's supported in your organization? Do you have Spring expertise? Do you have Spring support? Do you have Nginx expertise and Nginx support? Which one gets you the most help on your path of production? Probably for a lot of workloads, it's going to be similar. But if milliseconds matter, if latency is the new downtime for you, then yeah, take a look. But I will say lean into what's supported in your org.
Yeah, and if you're working with a ton of Spring applications, I mean, it just makes sense because we're doing all of the things that we might do in individual applications in a certain, in a single place. Those common problems, things like logging and security and observability. Like we'll do all those at the gateway level. Let's just bring in Spring Cloud Gateway, and then if you want to take this one step further. If you do all the things Spring, we have Gateway commercial support, which makes a lot of this easier. Like, hey, I have single sign-on and I want to be able to do that. Spring Cloud Gateway supports that. So there are a lot of things you can do there.
Again, Rajiv brings up Hibernate 6.4 has issues in native image run, and there are already issues. Yeah, so the images, Hibernate is the example. I want to clarify and go back to your initial statement. The Spring support for native images is there. The issue here is Hibernate having the problems with metadata and being reachable for these native images. So that's two different buckets. But yeah.
And I will say, I think, so if you're using like 3.3 and this is not working with a specific version of Hibernate, yes, we include the version of Hibernate that you should be using, but you can override that in your POM and say, hey, I want to use this version of Hibernate because I know that works with whatever use case I'm using it for. So maybe just try flipping that version of Hibernate.
Yeah.
Cool.
This is great. Fun
All right.
stuff.
Well,
this was
somebody asked again, why is this the last episode? This is not the last episode. I just want to be very clear on that. This is April Fool's Day. We had a little bit of fun. We love this show every single week.
It's my favorite time of the week.
We have so much fun interacting with you guys and just like, hearing what everybody's working on. Like, what are the problems that you're facing? What are the questions that you have? Because this is what we love to do. This is what we get to do. We get to like find out what are those questions and hopefully help answer them. So this show's going nowhere until they yank us away from it. But that doesn't seem like anytime soon. Thanks to you guys showing up every week. You guys have made the show very, very popular, and we appreciate that. So.
Jonas, thank you so much for hanging out with us. We have a lot of fun here, and yeah, I appreciate everybody. And yeah, let's kick it into gear. Let's say one last thing. It's not too early to start planning for Spring 1. Coming up in August. If you, especially for this audience, especially for those of you that are listening on the podcast, if you have been around and you're doing stuff and you've done something interesting that somebody else might enjoy learning from, let's talk about getting you to submit a session to this call for papers for Spring 1.
Which is now open.
Yeah, it's
open. Now open. Yeah.
Let's get some presentations. Let's get some submissions. And if you've got questions you would like help submitting, I'm offering it to you right now. I want to help you get a session submitted for the Spring 1 call for papers.
I will be reviewing those on the committee, so I can be bribed, but not monetarily, just with your time. So
there you go. So it's not too soon, right? Start asking now.
All right. Well, DaShaun, this was a lot of fun. I'm really happy that this wasn't actually our last episode because I probably would have been crying the entire time. So
I will definitely cry.
I'm happy we get to come back and do this next week. Although we don't get to come do this next week. I will be on vacation. We'll see if we're going to have a show, but we'll see if we can get something scheduled.
I'll be here.
All right. But with that, if you need help getting into production, who are you going to call?
Call me.
Call DaShaun.
Yeah.
He wants to help you get to production. All right, friends. This has been a lot of fun. We will see you in the next episode. Thanks again, and have happy coding.